My brother and I had always been into maps, especially old ones. He found this ancient topo map online, from the 60s or something, showing a forgotten fire tower deep in a state forest in Virginia. It wasn't on any of the newer maps. We thought it would be cool to hike out and find it, not just for the view, but for the feeling of finding something most people forgot existed. We parked at a trailhead off a quiet back road, early in the morning. The air was still cool, and the woods felt fresh, dewy and green and alive. We had our packs, some snacks, a couple water bottles each, a compass, and my brother's map printed out. The trail started off wide and well-marked, easy to follow. Tall trees lined both sides, and we passed a couple of hikers during the first hour or so. Around noon, we reached a fork. The main trail curved gently to the right and kept going, but just to the left, we noticed a narrow path, unmarked, barely a trail at all. It looked like maybe it used to be part of the system but hadn't been maintained in decades. Fallen branches and half-rotted logs crossed parts of it, and the undergrowth was creeping back in. But it pointed in the right direction, toward where the old fire tower was marked. We decided to take it. First, it felt like an adventure. We joked about being explorers, finding something no one had seen in decades. But the deeper we went, the more it started to feel off. The trees were tighter together here, denser. The air felt heavier, and after a while, it hit me that I couldn't hear anything anymore. No birds, no rustling in the brush, no breeze. Just the sound of our boots crunching over the old, soft ground. It was subtle, but it built. That feeling that something was wrong, even if you couldn't explain it. I kept glancing over my shoulder for no reason. My brother was doing the same, even if he tried to hide it. The trail kept narrowing until it was just a faint depression in the leaves. Eventually, it vanished altogether. We stood there, sweating, staring into the woods. We hadn't seen anything like a tower, no clearings, just thick forest pressing in from all sides. We were about to turn around to retrace our steps when we saw it, maybe 20 feet off to our left. A rope, hanging from a dead, gray tree. It swung slightly, even though there was no wind. It was frayed at the bottom, not fresh, but not ancient either. You could still tell what it had been. A noose. Under it, the ground was torn up. Not like a random patch of disturbed dirt, but a clean oval, maybe 6 feet long, 2 or 3 wide. Like a grave. The dirt was loose and dark, clumped in ways that made it clear it had been dug up recently. Something had definitely been buried there, and something had definitely been taken out. I don't know how long we stood there. Could have been 30 seconds. Could have been 5 minutes. Long enough for the silence to stretch so far it snapped. That's when we heard it. Laughter. Soft, cracked, breathy. Came from behind us. Not far. Maybe 20 feet. Maybe closer. It wasn't loud. It wasn't hysterical. Just wrong. It sounded like someone laughing under their breath. Like they were standing behind a curtain, waiting for us to notice. I didn't look. I didn't move. But then I saw my brother's eyes shift behind me, widen just a little. That was all it took. We ran. No discussion. No let's go. Just pure instinct. We ran the way we'd come, but nothing looked familiar anymore. The woods blurred into a mess of brown and green. Tree after tree, branch after branch clawing at our arms and packs. We didn't speak, didn't stop, just kept moving. The trail was gone. We lost it almost immediately. We tried to head in the general direction we came from, but it was hopeless. Everything looked the same. Trees, roots, rocks. We stumbled into a patch of thorns, tore our sleeves. At one point, my brother tripped and nearly fell face first into a rotting log. The laughter was gone, but that didn't help. It felt like whatever made it was just moving through the woods with us. One step behind, waiting. Eventually, we hit a dry creek bed. It looked old and mostly unused, but it ran straight. We figured it had to lead somewhere. Maybe a road, maybe another trail. Anything. We followed it for what felt like an hour. By then, the sun had started to shift lower, and the shadows grew longer. I kept glancing behind us, expecting to see someone step out from the trees, but no one did. Finally, the creek dipped beneath a rusted culvert pipe, and just past that we saw gravel. A road. Not a big one, just a narrow maintenance path, but it meant safety. I almost dropped to my knees in relief. We followed the road until we found a sign. Faded, cracked, but still legible. It had the name of the forest and a junction number. About 2 miles later, we came out near the parking lot where our car was. There was a ranger station nearby, so we went inside, mostly to report what we'd seen. The guy inside looked maybe late 50s, polite but distracted. When we told him where we'd gone and what we'd found, his eyes changed. He didn't smile. He just listened. When we mentioned the noose, his face tightened, just a little. He asked us to show him the map. My brother handed it over. The ranger pointed at the area we'd circled. "That trail doesn't exist anymore," he said quietly. "Hasn't for a long time. We closed it off back in the early 80s. Someone went missing out there. Local guy. Took his own life near the old tower. His brother tried to bring his body back, but by the time they found him, the place was too messed up. They never reopened it. We asked if people still go back there. He shook his head, said there were too many accidents, too many reports of people getting turned around or hurt. He told us to stay on marked trails from now on, then handed us a bottle of water each and thanked us for letting him know. We didn't tell him about the laughter. I don't think he would have believed it. I'm not sure I would have if I hadn't heard it myself. We never went back. My brother tossed the map in the trash before we even got home. Didn't say anything, just crumpled it up and dropped it at a gas station. We've done plenty of hikes since then, but we stick to real trails now. Ones with signs and markers and people nearby. Every now and then, though, usually when we're out in the woods and everything goes quiet, I remember that patch of forest, the rope, the torn up earth, and that laugh behind us. And I don't look back. I was about 3 weeks into my solo hike on the Pacific Northwest Trail. I'd started up near Glacier and was heading west, covering around 15 miles a day. That evening had been quiet. Sky overcast, the forest damp but not soaked. Just that ever-present Pacific Northwest moisture clinging to everything. I'd passed a couple of hikers earlier in the day heading the opposite direction, but by late afternoon I hadn't seen anyone for hours. I'd planned to stop and make camp near a stream I saw on the map, a little ways off the trail, maybe another hour's hike. But then, as I came around a bend in the trees, I saw something that made me stop walking altogether. Through a small break in the woods, maybe 50 feet off the trail, there was a clearing. Not a big one, just maybe 20 feet across, surrounded by thick pines. And in the center of it, a campfire, already lit. It wasn't blazing, just quietly burning. Low flames, orange and steady. No smoke that I could see, which was odd given the damp air. But what stood out the most was what wasn't there. No tent, no sleeping bag, no backpack, no gear of any kind, just the fire. I stepped off the trail and moved toward the clearing slowly, trying to make sense of it. The leaves and pine needles were soft underfoot. I didn't want to sneak up on someone, so I called out. Just a simple hello. No answer. I waited, called again, louder. Still nothing. That's when I noticed it. On the far edge of the firelight, just past where the shadows start to swallow the trees, there was something standing there. A deer. At first, I thought it was just a regular whitetail. It wasn't that big, probably a young adult, but something about it immediately felt wrong. It wasn't moving. Not a twitch, not even a shift of weight. It just stood there with its legs straight, head turned toward me, completely still. Its eyes reflected the fire in this weird, glassy way. I've seen deer plenty of times, and their eyes do catch light, but this looked unnatural. Too bright, too focused. I took a single step closer just to get a better look, and that was all it took for it to bolt. Not in a natural loping way either. It jerked sideways like it had been yanked, then vanished into the trees in complete silence. No crunch of leaves, no rustling brush, just gone. I turned back toward the fire, now really uneasy. I scanned the area more carefully, and that's when I saw the footprints. Human, barefoot. The toes were clear in the dirt. The prints circled the fire loosely, almost like whoever made them was pacing. and then they led off into the woods, right in the direction where the deer had been standing. Against my better judgment, I followed them. Not far, maybe 20 feet. Then they just stopped. There wasn't a break in the ground. No patch of rock or dry leaves. Just soft earth, the same as before. But the prints ended. Just ended. I stood there, trying to figure out what I was seeing. Trying to find the next print. Some sign that the person had veered off. But there was nothing. And then I heard it. From behind me. Close. A whisper. Asterisk. It's warm now. Asterisk. I spun around fast. There was no one there. Nothing. Just the trees. The clearing. The fire. Except the fire was out. Not dying out. Not flickering low. Completely out. No smoke. No embers. No glow. Not even the smell of it. Like it had never been burning. I stared at it, heart pounding. My headlamp was on by then, and I scanned the trees. Still nothing. No movement. No sound. Not even the usual forest sounds. No wind in the branches. No insects. Nothing. It was like everything around me had gone dead. I backed away slowly, heart in my throat. Then I turned and walked. Fast. Got back on the trail and started moving as quickly as I could without breaking into a full sprint. That lasted maybe 5 minutes before I started hearing things in the woods to either side of me. Light snaps of branches. Quick, irregular. Not animals. Not consistent enough. That's when I started running. I didn't stop. I pushed for miles, legs burning, lungs tight. I don't even know how long I ran. Long enough that when I finally saw a dim light in the distance, artificial light, I almost cried. It was a backcountry ranger station. Small, single structure. Empty except for one guy, middle-aged, quiet. He let me in without asking many questions. I probably looked crazy, drenched in sweat, wild-eyed. When I finally caught my breath, I tried to explain what I'd seen. Told him about the fire, the deer, the footprints, the voice. He listened, then nodded slowly. Said something about isolation playing tricks on people. Dehydration, exhaustion, that kind of thing. I told him I'd marked the location with GPS. He offered to take a look. We pulled up the coordinates. He frowned, tried a few different satellite views, checked older maps. There was no clearing. Not there. Nothing but continuous trees. He even showed me topography overlays. According to the maps, that spot had never been cleared. No campgrounds, no fire pits, no record of any kind. I didn't know what to say. He offered me a cot in the back room. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing that deer, the stiff posture, its eyes, and hearing that voice again. In the morning, I left. Got back on the trail, but I avoided that whole stretch. Took a detour that added 2 days to the hike. Since then, I've gone back through my GPS logs more than once. The coordinates are still there. Same spot, but if you pull it up on any map service, it's just blank forest. I don't tell many people about it. The few I've told either laugh it off or try to explain it away. Dream, exhaustion, misreading the terrain. But I was awake. I was clear-headed. And that fire was real. I've hiked a lot since then. Camped solo plenty of times. But I never, ever ignore my instincts anymore. And I don't follow barefoot footprints into the woods. Not ever again. Last fall, my girlfriend Jenna and I went on a weekend backpacking trip in Oregon. We'd been planning it for a while. Just the two of us, getting away from everything. The idea was to disconnect, no cell service, no distractions. Just quiet woods, cold nights, and a couple of good hikes. I'm ex-military, used to sleeping outside, rough terrain, that sort of thing. Jenna loves the outdoors too, though she's more about the peacefulness of it. She likes taking pictures of moss and tree bark and that kind of stuff. We parked at a small trailhead that barely got any traffic and hiked in about 6 miles the first day. We set up camp near a small stream, cooked some freeze-dried pasta over the stove, and turned in early. No issues, just crisp air, the crackle of fire, and the quiet hum of wind moving through pine needles. The second day we woke up to fog. the kind that hangs low and thick, muffling sound. Everything felt muted, like the woods were holding their breath. We ate a quick breakfast and decided to explore a bit off-trail. We weren't lost, just curious. I had a map and compass, and I always keep track of my bearings. We cut through a dense patch of forest, working our way along a steep slope where tree roots stuck out like claws from the dirt. After maybe an hour or so, we came to a strange clearing. Not natural, like something had been cut or cleared years ago and just never grew back right. The ground was uneven, patches of dead leaves, metal debris poking out of the soil. That's when we found it. Half buried in the hillside was a steel door, not like a shed door or an old cellar. It looked reinforced, thick as hell, with rust blooming around the edges. The kind of thing you'd expect on a bunker. There was no sign around it. No fencing, no warning, no markings. Just that solid slab of metal, tilted slightly with the hill, half swallowed by dirt and leaves. One hinge was busted, and the door hung just slightly open, enough to see a sliver of black inside. I knew immediately it wasn't right. I've seen bunkers before, military storage, Cold War relics. But even the old decommissioned ones have some kind of markings or concrete reinforcements around them. This one looked homemade but heavy-duty, welded shut at some point and forced open again. We stood there for a minute, unsure. The silence around us was heavy. No birds, no insects, just the faint drip of water somewhere inside. I pulled out my headlamp. Jenna did the same. I pushed the door open with my foot. It gave with a low, scraping groan, and the smell hit us immediately: old rust, damp concrete, something like rotting paper or mold. A narrow stairwell led down at a sharp angle, probably 15 feet. Concrete walls, metal handrail rusted to hell. The kind of place that hadn't seen sunlight in decades. We should have walked away, but I'm not built that way, and curiosity can be dangerous when you think you're prepared for anything. We went down slowly, one step at a time, the beam of our lights cutting through dust and darkness. The stairs ended in a small landing that opened into a larger concrete room, maybe 20 by 20 feet. The floor was covered in dirt and scattered junk. Broken chairs, a rusted cot, shattered jars and cans. The smell was worse inside. Wet concrete, mold, and something sour underneath it. Then I noticed the far wall. It was covered in photos. Hundreds of black and white headshots, probably printed from some old machine. Men, women, some younger, some older. Each one had a number handwritten underneath. Some had been slashed through with a thick red marker. A few had deep cuts through the eyes or mouth. I stood there staring at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. None of the faces looked familiar, but they were real people, expressions frozen, staring back. The red lines weren't random. There was a pattern or meaning behind them, and someone had come back to this place to do it. I looked over at Jenna and could tell she was already uneasy. She backed up a step toward the stairs. Then we heard it. A cough, not loud but close, muffled, like someone clearing their throat behind a wall. Not an animal, person, came from deeper inside. We didn't wait to find out more. We turned and ran, full speed up the stairs, almost slipping on the damp concrete. I didn't look back. Neither did Jenna. I remember pushing that heavy door open with my shoulder, shoving Jenna ahead of me, and we both tumbled out into the cold air. We didn't stop running until we hit the tree line. Even then, we kept moving, pausing only to catch our breath, retrace our path back toward camp. I checked behind us over and over, but saw nothing, heard nothing. The woods had swallowed the door again, fog curling around the trunks like smoke. When we got back to camp, I debated breaking it down or packing up and leaving that night. But we were tired and losing daylight, and I convinced myself that whatever it was, we'd already gotten away. We left at first light the next morning, hiked out in silence. It wasn't like before. The peace of the forest was gone. We felt watched the entire way back. The day after we got home, I called the local Forest Service office. I kept it straightforward, told them we'd come across what looked like an old underground structure in the woods, possibly unsafe, possibly military. I didn't mention the photos or the coughing. I just said they should check it out in case someone got hurt. A ranger called me back a few days later. Said they'd gone to the coordinates I gave. Said there was no open structure there. The hillside was intact. No steel door, no signs of digging. Nothing. But then he added something that stuck with me. He said the only thing they found was a new padlock bolted into the trunk of a nearby tree. Just hanging there. Not attached to anything. Brand new. No rust. Like someone wanted them to know it was sealed now. That made my stomach twist. I've thought about it 100 times since. I didn't imagine it. Jenna didn't imagine it. We both saw the same thing. The room, the photos, the sound. Someone had been living down there, or at least visiting, and someone had gone back after we left. Cleaned up, locked it down, made sure it couldn't be found again easily. I've hiked a lot of places. I've seen weird stuff in the woods. Abandoned cabins, rusted out cars, old boot prints where nobody should be. But nothing has stuck with me like that door. The way it was just sitting there in the earth, like something waiting to be uncovered. The way it looked like it had been used recently, but no one knew about it. We don't hike off-trail anymore. Jenna won't even go back to that region. I still think about it more often than I should. I still wonder who the people in those photos were, why some were crossed out, who was coughing, and I wonder who went back to lock the place up so quickly. Whatever that place was, someone didn't want it found, and they were ready to erase it fast. I know what I saw. That's enough. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone and not much ever happens. About 2 miles from where I lived, there was an old abandoned stone quarry tucked into the forest. It had been shut down for decades, overgrown and fenced off in some areas, though most of the barrier had rusted away or collapsed over time. Locals knew about it, of course. There were always rumors, the usual kind of teenage stuff. People said weird things happened there, but nobody could ever tell you exactly what. Mostly just stories. When I was around 16, my best friend Matt and I used to hike in the woods nearby. We weren't supposed to go near the quarry, mostly because it was dangerous. The walls were steep, and there were a few places where the water had pooled deep enough to drown in. But we were bored teenagers and liked pushing boundaries. We'd go out during the day sometimes just to explore. Never too deep, never after dark. But one summer night, hot, thick air, bugs everywhere, we decided to do something different. I don't even remember whose idea it was, but we dared each other to go to the quarry at night. We wanted to see if the rumors meant anything. Maybe we thought we'd see something cool or at least scare ourselves enough to get a story out of it. We packed 2 flashlights, both beat up from years of use. Mine had duct tape around the handle. We left just after 10 and walked the back trail we knew well. It wound through the woods, quiet except for the buzz of insects and the occasional snap of a twig under our boots. We didn't talk much, just that nervous energy building between us. It took us about 30 minutes to get close to the edge of the quarry. It opened up suddenly, one of those places where the trees stop, like someone drew a line and said, "That's enough." The ground fell away into a steep pit, probably 60 or 70 feet down in places, filled with rock ledges and standing pools of dark water. The moon gave just enough light to see the jagged outlines of the walls, but most of it was black. We stood there for a while, shining our lights into the pit, not really saying anything. The air felt heavier all of a sudden, like there was pressure in it. Then we heard it, not loud, faint, a short burst of what sounded like a scream. We froze, looked at each other, came again. Not the same tone, more like a desperate yell, cut off halfway through. It wasn't a long scream, just sharp, short, like someone was trying to yell through something. Then silence. We listened for a while, not even breathing. A minute later, it came again. A scream, then silence. Over and over. At first, I tried to convince myself it was an animal, some kind of bird, an owl maybe, but the sound didn't carry like that. It wasn't coming from above. It echoed. It bounced off the stone in a way that made it clear it came from inside the quarry. We didn't move for several minutes. Then it happened again. But this time it wasn't just a scream. A voice. A human voice. "Help, please." I felt my spine go stiff. I looked at Matt. He was already backing up. I whispered that we should go down and check, see if someone fell in, maybe got hurt. He shook his head, told me we should call the police. We argued in low voices, both half whispering. Neither of us wanted to admit how scared we were, but we were both on edge. I kept looking toward the sound, wondering how deep the pit really was. If someone could survive a fall down there. Then we heard something else. Not a voice, not an animal. Footsteps, fast ones, crashing through the woods behind us. Not in the quarry, but in the trees to our left. Something moving fast through the underbrush. Heavy steps, snapping branches, dry leaves crunching underfoot. It didn't sound like a deer. It didn't sound like anything trying to avoid being heard. It was coming straight for us. We bolted. No second thoughts. We didn't even try to see what it was. We just turned and ran. Matt was ahead of me. I nearly dropped my flashlight twice, the beam bouncing wildly through the trees as I sprinted. We didn't stop running until we reached the gravel pull-off where we'd parked my car. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped the keys trying to unlock it. Matt was yelling at me to hurry, glancing back toward the trail. When we finally got in and locked the doors, both of us sat there in silence, panting, sweat pouring off us. We called 911, told them someone might be in the quarry, someone screaming for help. Told them what we heard. They said they'd send someone out and told us to wait nearby. 2 cruisers pulled up about 15 minutes later. We flagged them down and explained everything again. They grabbed flashlights from their trunks and told us to stay put. We watched the beams of their lights bob into the woods. They were gone a long time, 20 minutes, maybe more. When they came back, one of them walked over to our car. He said they didn't find anything. No signs of anyone down in the quarry. No recent disturbances. No tracks around the rim besides ours. Nothing. Then he asked something that caught both of us off guard. You boys ever hear about the kids that went missing out here back in the 80s? We hadn't. He nodded, kind of tired. 2 boys about your age. Went exploring out here. Never came back. Nobody found them. Their parents had said they used to come out here a lot. One of them called 911 from a payphone just before they disappeared. The last thing the operator heard before the call cut out was, "Help, please." He didn't say anything after that, just gave us a long look and walked back to his car. We drove home in silence. My hands were still shaking on the wheel. That was years ago. Matt and I don't talk about it much now. We never went back to the quarry day or night. We took different hiking trails after that. Never wandered that close again. Sometimes, when I'm trying to fall asleep, I still hear that voice, the exact tone, the way it echoed in that pit of stone, the panic in it. It was real. I know it was, but the scariest part wasn't the scream. It wasn't even the voice. It was those crashing footsteps in the woods, coming fast like something or someone was trying to make sure we didn't get too close. And whatever it wasn't trying to hide. Two years ago, I went on a solo camping trip in northern Arizona. I had some time off work and needed to clear my head. The spot I picked was deep in the Coconino National Forest, about a 2-hour drive from Flagstaff and far from any towns or regular campgrounds. It wasn't an official campsite, just a flat clearing I found on a topographic map that looked secluded. I liked being alone in the woods. No traffic, no cell service, no people. Just the smell of pine needles, the breeze through the trees, and the sound of birds and insects. That first day, I hiked in maybe 5 miles with my pack, found the clearing still just like it looked on the map, and set up my small 1-person tent beneath a big ponderosa pine. The forest around me was thick, tall, straight trees with little undergrowth, just carpets of pine needles and dry leaves. The first night was peaceful. I built a small fire with dry wood, cooked a simple dinner of beans and rice on my camp stove, and listened to the owls hooting in the distance. No strange sounds, no animals getting too close, nothing that made me feel uneasy. I slept fine, bundled up in my sleeping bag as the temperature dropped. I remember thinking it was exactly what I needed, just me and the woods, no distractions. But the second night was different. I went to bed around 10 p.m. after another quiet evening. The forest was silent except for the usual sounds: crickets, a few creaks from the trees shifting in the wind. It was colder than the first night. I remember waking up sometime around 3 a.m. I didn't check the time on my watch, but I could tell it was deep into the night. What woke me up wasn't a dream or the cold. It was the sound of branches snapping. Not just one or two small twigs, but repeated, deliberate snapping, like something heavy stepping over dry wood. At first, I stayed still in my sleeping bag, listening. The sounds came from maybe 30 to 40 feet away, behind the tent, near a cluster of trees. I thought maybe it was a deer or elk moving through the woods, but the sounds didn't quite match the way animals move. They were too slow, too careful. I waited a few minutes, then slowly unzipped the tent and peeked out. At first, I saw nothing but darkness and tall shadows. My fire had gone out, and the moon was only partially visible through the branches. I scanned the tree line with my eyes, trying to adjust to the dim light. And then I saw him, a silhouette, a man. He was standing between two trees, facing in my direction. Not moving, not making a sound, just standing there. I sat there in the tent entrance, frozen. My first thought was that maybe it was another camper who'd gotten lost or needed help. I called out. Not loud, just enough so if he was close, he'd hear me. I asked if he needed anything, if he was okay. He didn't move. I waited. Still nothing. I felt this wave of cold pass through me. Not from the air, but from something else. Like my body realized something before my brain did. I grabbed my flashlight and aimed it toward the spot where he was standing. The beam lit up the trees, but by the time I focused it where he had been, he was gone. But not just gone, he had moved. I caught the quick shape of him ducking behind the nearest tree fast. Too fast to be startled. It wasn't the movement of someone surprised. It was precise, intentional. He didn't run. He slid out of view like he had done it before. That's when the panic really set in. I didn't hear him leave. No footsteps, no running. Just silence again. I sat there for at least an hour, flashlight in hand, pointing it in all directions, waiting to hear something else. But the woods had gone completely still. No insects, no wind, not even the usual creaking branches. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I stayed in the tent, fully clothed, with my pocket knife in one hand and the flashlight in the other. Every now and then I'd hear a distant crack or rustle, but I couldn't tell if it was just the woods or if he was still out there. I didn't hear footsteps or breathing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As soon as the first light started to show through the trees, I packed everything. I didn't bother with breakfast. I shoved my sleeping bag and tent into my pack as fast as I could, barely rolling them. I didn't want to wait around and see if he'd show up again. I didn't even stop to check the area where he'd been standing the night before. The hike back was about 5 miles, mostly downhill. I moved fast, barely stopping to drink water. I didn't feel safe until I was at least 2 miles from the site. That's when I slowed down a little, caught my breath, and tried to calm my nerves. But that didn't last. About a mile from where I'd camped, I came around a bend in the trail and stopped dead. He was there again. Same man, same clothes, same stillness, standing just off the trail, maybe 20 feet back among the trees. This time I could see him more clearly. Dark jacket, pale face, motionless. Not a hiker, no gear, no pack, just standing there, staring in my direction. I didn't say anything. I didn't stop for more than a few seconds. I just kept walking. I didn't run. I didn't want to show fear, but my heart was beating so hard I could barely hear the wind through the trees. I didn't look back. When I got back to my car at the trailhead, I checked all around the lot before unlocking the doors. There were no other cars. No signs anyone else had parked there, just mine. I drove straight to the nearest ranger station, about 40 minutes away. I told them everything, where I had camped, what I saw, what happened during the night. One of the rangers took it seriously. He said I wasn't the first person to report something like that. Other campers over the last few years had talked about a man in the woods. Never speaking, never approaching, just watching. Always alone, always on foot. No one had ever gotten close to him, and they never found any campsites or signs that someone was living out there long term. They took down my report and sent someone out to check the area. A couple days later, one of the rangers called me. He said they found footprints. Human, male, barely worn tread on the soles like old shoes. They followed the prints a little ways before they disappeared into a patch of hard ground. No tent, no campsite, no fire pits, nothing that showed he'd been staying in the area. I asked if they had any suspects or if they thought it was someone dangerous. The ranger just said, "We don't know who he is, but we've heard about him before." That was the last I heard. I haven't gone camping solo since. I still hike sometimes, but always in more populated areas. I stick to trails with people, and I don't stay overnight unless I'm with someone. I still think about that man, how quiet he was, how he moved, how he just watched. He wasn't lost. He wasn't looking for help. He was there for a reason, and I still don't know what it was.